First, I'd like to welcome everybody to our meeting this evening, and a special welcome to the Sea Scouts. So glad you were able to join us. I ask that you all mute yourselves now so that we can hear our presenter and not a lot of background noise. We would also ask you to put in the chat room where you are calling in from. We find it interesting. We get people from Maine to Florida to Tennessee and or certainly around the Annapolis area. So if you can do that now, that would be helpful. And we are going to have Davis introduce Lou Novak, our guest speaker, who's going to talk to us about something that many of us find very interesting, and a situation we hope not to find ourselves in the middle of. So Lou, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience with us. Davis will be responsible for introducing you and for moderating the question and answer session. Any of you who have any questions for Lou, you can put them in the chat room, as Davis said, and we will have a Q&A session after your presentation, or if you're willing to take questions during the presentation, however you want to handle it is great with us. Again, thank you so much for being with us. And Davis, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, most of us have heard from Lou before. He's been a previous speaker and personal friend. Lou, in addition to being, do you have an unlimited license?
No, 1,600 ton.
1,600 tons, a bit larger than mine, but in addition to being a CAPCA member and Chesapeake sailor, he has ventured all over the world in various adventures and deliveries and humanitarian efforts as well. Lou is, I know him from being a co-volunteer with Sea Scout Ship 1942 in Arlington, Virginia and Solomon's Island. Many of those scouts are online tonight to listen to his presentation. So welcome to all of our scouts and all of our CAPCA members. And Lou, I will hand it to you. Before you start, as Vicki said, if you will type your questions into the chat, I will ask Lou those questions at the end, and it allows me to kind of order them in a logical way. And if there's anything very complex, I may ask you to read your question to him. So keep that in mind, and I'll be following that along. So with no further ado, Lou, you want to start?
Sure. If you could put the first slide up.
If I can see it, yeah.
All right, so I was, okay, can we get it in presentation mode?
Yeah, I got to move some things around my screen because.
Okay, so I was 20 years old, and I was reporting to my third ship as a cadet midshipman, and the ship's name was the USNS Rigel. It was a breakbulk ship, about 570 feet length overall, and refrigerated holds. I reported aboard to Captain Leroy Butts. Captain Butts was a cantankerous captain. It was sailing with him was like sailing with Archie Bunker, for those of you who are old enough to remember Archie Bunker from TV. He wasn't particularly friendly. He routinely referred people by racial slurs, and well, he was a captain. He got away with it. Anyway, so our voyage was to initially go from Norfolk to the Mediterranean. We were in shopping at Rota, Spain, and then we had a lot of deliveries to make. And so when we set out from Norfolk, it was just at the beginning of hurricane season. And after a few days underway, we got a message that there was a hurricane in between, near our Great Circle route across the North Atlantic. And we had to divert some, but we were going to get as close as we safely could. So, and as far as Captain Butts was concerned, we didn't have to shave too much off. We didn't have to divert a whole lot. We didn't want to lose any time. And the weather got worse and worse the closer we got to that hurricane. And that hurricane was following the Gulf Stream. And so the Gulf Stream is a big heat engine for storms like that. So they can persist for a very long time if they stay close to the Gulf Stream. And so for the next 8 days in crossing the Atlantic, we were tossed and thrown, and we were definitely getting slowed down. Now, headquarters says, although you have 13 days to cross the Atlantic to Inchop and to the Med, we will give you an extra day for weather if you take it. And Captain Butts actually declined that extra day for weather and said that we will take an extra day in port in La Palma, Mallorca, where he happened to have a girlfriend. And so as we slowed down, we saw this 13-day window diminishing. And we were not going to make it. So Captain Butts did something that I definitely learned firsthand not to do. He put more turns on the prop in order to make up for that slowdown. And that is really the wrong thing to do, because it really beats up the ship and the crew. It beat us up so much that the stewards department stopped cooking, basically, because anything that had fluid had hot fluid, and it was coming out of the pots and landing on the staff, and it was just unsafe to have anything cooking in the galley. And so they would then the stewards department would lay out crackers and bowls of fruit onto the table so we can get some sort of nourishment. But that was the crackers were getting thrown on the deck, and so was the fruit. It was just cracker crumbs after a while, and the fruit was just rolling around up and down the decks. So then as we were getting tossed around, even over the long haul, what was happening is we would, because we were getting thrown out of our bunks, we would take our PFDs and prop it up on one side of the bunk, so we had a little crease in our mattress, and hold us against, hold us in there so we wouldn't roll out of our bunks as the ship was going through all sorts of motion.
You can just put your on, just so I can see the video. I don't need to have your.
Okay, you may want to mute yourselves. Okay, thank you. So then, but this sort of sleepless, hungry voyaging took place for about 8 days. Finally, we were free from the storm, but I can tell you, the wave climate still was very strong. We still were going through about 20-foot waves after this, and we were northwest of the Azores. And behind schedule. I was standing 48 watch, and about around 6 o'clock in the morning, I was looking out, and I saw kind of what looked like a raised line in the ocean. It seemed a little bit, just a smidgen higher than the horizon usually is. Now, you may say, well, how can you tell? Well, you try to learn, you try to take your star sights and stuff. You know about where to look for the horizon. And it just seemed a little off. And then within minutes, it became apparent there was a really enormous wave. It was hard to tell how far away it was, but there was a big wave, and it went as far as I could see either side of me. So it was approaching the ship, and it was enormous. Now I was out on the bridge wing when I figured out, oh, this is gonna hit us. And and the wave was it was hitting us, and I was running in, but I was looking up at the wave, and my height of eye was about 60 feet. I knew that for navigation purposes, 60 feet above the water. And as I looked up, I saw green water. That the wave that had hit us had not broken. There was no air in the top of that wave, in the crest. There was no foam. It was still green water. So I estimate that's well over 80 feet of wave that had hit us. And I dove into the bridge and closed the hatch behind me. And that wave continued back aft and started to crash down. It broke, and it hit our aft deck and our elevators, our cargo elevators, and our helo deck. And as that wave collapsed onto us, there was water all around. The only thing that was sticking up out of the water was the house, and I was in the bridge, and I could see this, and it was a lot quieter, except for really large gurgles. It was eerily silent compared to what I was used to hearing. And then it took 20, maybe 30 seconds. And if we could just advance to the next slide, what it kind of looked like. That's what it looked like before it hit. About, this is an artist's interpretation. And incidentally, that's not my ship, but there's a reason I picked this image, and I will go into it later. And if we could advance one more slide. And this is what it looks like after about 20 seconds, after you've been hit. If you're lucky, this is what it looks like. You shipping off the water. That wave caused incredible damage, and it's hard to imagine the force of so many thousands of tons of water hitting you at such a speed. I'm estimating it was over 30 miles an hour that it came down on us back aft. That's just an estimate. And our steel elevator guides, which are pretty heavy duty, were just twisted like Play-Doh. And the ship really flexed under this wave. And in fact, where the shaft meets, it goes into the Kingsbury thrust bearing and imparts the thrust to the hull of the vessel, that have flexed so violently that we were just squirting out oil all through the engine room, lube oil from the bearing. I mean, we had really stressed it out, and a lot of the shoes, a lot of the bearings, parts of the bearing had to be replaced. That happened later on. We managed to limp into port, and needless to say, Captain Butts had to report that we did not make the 13 days by a long shot. In fact, we missed it by a few days, and we need expensive repairs in port. Now, at that time, you could not tell me. I mean, I know we were being told and we were taught there was no such thing as rogue waves, but after what I had seen, I knew that there was something wrong with that narrative. I knew very well that there were monster waves out there, and I had just survived one.
Lou,
Now,
Lou,
Yes.
if I may, just a quick question. What was the size of your vessel?
570 feet.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so if we could go back a slide, I'll tell you why I picked this. It turns out the way, when we were struck by this wave, this location wasn't a stranger to rogue waves. At least that's the suspicion, because 10 years prior, the largest ship in the West German merchant marine, it was the last ship, a lighter aboard ship. It was over 800 feet long, disappeared with just a smidgen of a trace, but disappeared with all hands. And it was a mystery how such a large and powerful ship could actually disappear like that. And it was in this same location. And we'll go into why this location seems to be one of those parts of the globe where ships do disappear and where there are what we expect are rogue waves. Anyway, so if we could go 2 slides in the, yeah, okay. And so what happened that allows us to now know that there are such things as rogue waves? And what happened was we had a laser measuring device affixed to the Dropner oil platform in the North Sea. And on New Year's Day in 1995, it recorded a wave that was almost 20 meters high. So that's, and the definition of a rogue wave is twice the height of the surrounding conditions, or the mean wave height. And this is an event that occurs about 1 in 10,000 waves. You will get a rogue wave, one that's twice the height of all the rest. And that estimate of 1 in 3 days, which may seem like very little, is just merely my estimate. I was using a wave because of where I had been at sea. We would encounter waves about every 9 seconds. So that's where I got the once in 3 days. But when you have a wave once in 9 seconds, usually these waves are, 8 feet tall or like that. So when you get a 16-footer in 3 days, that's not too alarming. That's acceptable. However, when you have quadruple the wave height, that's a freak wave event. That's a 1 in 300,000 event. It's about by my estimate, every 6,000 nautical miles. So what I probably experienced would be more correctly defined as a freak wave. And so now how does that happen? How does a rogue wave or a freak wave take place? Well, we do know from our research so far that when wind and wave are opposite a predominant current, then we build steeper waves. We build steeper, higher waves when we have that condition. So that probably happens in a few of these locations. Also, in particular, bottom morphology can contribute to increasing wave height. And so whenever you have a submarine canyon that where the wave is proceeding from the deeper part of the canyon to canyon floor towards the shallower part, and if the walls of the canyon are converging, you also develop a rogue wave in a condition like that. So that sort of thing happens near the Azores. Another location is between Madagascar and the continent of Africa. And we have a lot of rogue waves have happened there. There's a lot of ships disappearances there. with all these ships disappearances, you'd think, well, that's a very remarkable thing that you could actually disappear a ship and not get a lot of investigation. How did that happen? How did we come to think that rogue waves were just mythology for so long? Well, part of it has to do with because the simulations and the algorithms used to calculate rogue waves were faulty. Scientists were telling the public they were impossible. But we also had radar that detected wave height on satellites. And these satellites had been going since the 70s, getting 24-hour coverage across the oceans. Whenever rogue waves would show up by radar, they were considered to be outlier events and discarded in order to maintain, in order to have radar results on the satellites that went along with the predominant theory regarding rogue waves, that they were mythology. So there was some deliberate blindness that was taking place. So just to, as we know, science is not exactly always right. It's always exploring to be right. So sometimes there are periods where they're gravely mistaken. Now, just so you know, rogue waves are not tsunamis. They're not tidal waves. In fact, I don't know if there's really such thing as a tidal wave as appropriately named. But tsunamis are events that are precipitated by geological events. Usually there's a landslide, a submerged landslide that can precipitate a tsunami, or there is a shift in a tectonic plate, a descent that can precipitate a tsunami. And tsunamis at sea are relatively benign events for large ocean vessels. You wouldn't even notice it. It is only when they approach the shallows that they increase in height and there can be coastal flooding as a result of tsunami. These events are, rogue waves are not tidal bores. Tidal bores are just a tidal event where this wedge of salt water that goes up an estuary can propel an increased height of water ingressing into an estuary. I've seen tidal bores and they're not, well, the biggest one I have seen firsthand was under a foot high, but I understand they can get maybe a 1.5 feet high. It's not a Seiche wave. Rogue waves are not Seiche waves. I don't know if I haven't seen a Seiche wave in the Chesapeake, but I have seen it in Mobile Bay. I've seen a Seiche wave take place. If we could advance to the next slide. A Seiche wave happens when we have a strong predominant wind going one direction, and it piles up the water on one shore. And then what happens is, let's say there's a frontal passage, and then the wind reverses direction and propels the water that had been built up to the other side of the bowl, so to speak. And so you'll have pretty strong currents and high water trying to leave the constrained harbors on the high water side, trying to go towards the low water side. And that's the largest danger given by a Seiche wave. I was looking at some data on Chesapeake Bay when there was an east-west wind going across the Chesapeake Bay, and the frontal passage was going, had crossed, it crossed the bay, and then the winds reversed, and it caused what they said, a 50 centimeter seiche wave across, which although it may be surprising and a little disconcerting, I think that most of you would be able to handle that. So could we advance to the next slide? All right. As I said, we had satellite images, radar images that demonstrated that rogue waves were taking place in the ocean, far away from any observers other than the satellites. And it's highlighted on the left. And then on the right, you can see how the bottom morphology can dramatically affect the way that waves propagate and reinforce. Reinforcing of the waves is how rogue waves can be made. And if you look, let's see if I can, yeah, I don't know. Are you all able to see my cursor? You can see an area where two wave fronts are reinforcing each other and making a higher wave. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So anyway, that's an important part to understand about rogue waves. If we could advance to the next slide. Here's the geographic distribution of reported rogue waves. As I mentioned, between Madagascar and the continent of Africa, you have a few reported, and then you have a whole bunch reported around the North Sea area and near Iceland. And then you have another cluster off the coast of Canada. That was something that sounded unusual to me. Someone please mute. Okay. So anyway, what I think is unusual is the North Sea has really the largest cluster. And I have to believe that it is some of the roughest water. You know, you got roaring 40s and furious 50s. You got good winds in order to generate waves. But I couldn't speak to the bottom morphology being favorable towards it, but you do have a whole lot of observers there, though, and that's why we have the reports of rogue waves in under those conditions. There are probably other places on this planet that do experience rogue waves frequently, but they may actually sink a vessel, and there's no report made. So anyway, that's one of the problems. It's hard to know what you don't know because sometimes you don't have survivors. If we could advance to the next slide. So I'm not going to give you like the perfect method to survive a rogue wave, because there is none. I will talk a little bit about how to negotiate large waves. And you can see there's some things you shouldn't do. You shouldn't try to gun it and fly off the top of a wave. That's a nope. You should not try to be sideways or have your vessel traveling nearly parallel to the wavefront. That's a nope. What you try to do is, like a professional, you try to negotiate a large wave by using judicious use of power and not hot dogging it. All right. Some some methods for negotiating large waves is available on the next slide. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, and I'll just say, although I'm talking about negotiating large waves, if we are talking about a rogue wave event where you have a wave that's twice the height of the rest, you're going to treat that a little differently than negotiating a whole bunch of waves, because we're gonna treat like a rogue wave event is a one-time thing. You don't repeat the way you do it all the time, and it's important to understand if you have limited options. If your boat length is shorter than the wave face, you got to have a lot of discretionary horsepower to overcome that problem, and you may not overcome it. So one of the ways to negotiate a wave that is taller than, has a wave face that is more than the length of your boat, is to, if you're facing it and going up it, you at the tightest curve, you may need to, what we call, quarter it, attack it at 45 degrees, and then quickly, when the curve lessens, the curve up the face, then you got to go straight up the face as fast as you can, so in order to keep the wave from breaking over and pushing your bow over, and where you would, it's called a pitch pole event when you go bow over transom, falling over. So you're going to try to get to the top, and once you get to the top of the wave, you're going to have to slow down, approaching the top. And because if you go over the top and you lose control, you're gonna fall down. Or if you don't slow down fast enough, you could actually plunge down the back of the wave and stuff your bow. And again, you could put your transom over your bow and pitch pole in that fashion. So you're gonna have to, and you're gonna have very little time to think about all these things. You try to keep as I said, your vessel's direction within 30 degrees to the normal of the wavefront. That means the real threat is to have a wave face that is actually bigger than the beam of your vessel, because that can make you breach. So you want to keep very close to within 30 degrees of the wavefront, and the closer the better. Now, as I said before, if you're dead on 90 degrees to the wavefront, there's the risk of, when you get over to the other side, to plunge and to stuff your boat. So if you are overtaken by a rogue wave, if you're following a wave and you survive getting pooped, and you're on the backside of the wave, what you should do is, if you can, manipulate the power so you stay on the back of the wave, and to keep from backing into the trough, but don't go over the crest. All right, and I mentioned also, if you're going up the face, then you're going to need to reduce power just prior to crest, going over the crest. All right. I believe, yeah, if we can go to the next, and I'm prepared to answer what questions I can. I'll do my best to answer your questions, but someone in the audience may actually have some experience that would, they may want to share with our crowd.
Well, let's open it up to questions. I had a question earlier about more precisely where you were when it hit. Was it on the shore of Portugal, or further across?
It was a little further northwest, but Okay, I would say it was, oh, I couldn't give you much more than it was probably about 100 miles northwest of the Azores. You know, it's been a few decades, so.
Yeah. Lou, this is Hans. Can I make a comment?
Sure.
There is a still famous book called The Perfect Storm, which describes a major storm event. I'm hazy on the time, off the Great Banks of New England coast, where a number of fishing vessels were caught in a most dramatic and unfortunate fashion. And a journalist took the time to investigate the event in great detail and captured this in book form, which is called A Perfect Storm. I have forgotten the name of the journalist, but if you look it up, it describes exactly what you are referring to here, how to negotiate a wave and how some of the vessels that approached the waves head on slid back and then went under. Not pooping, but really went under that way, slid down into the water. So it's worth looking at.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. The suggestions I have that I gave, there's no guarantee that they'll work. I mean, Sebastian Junger, that's what I thought.
Yeah, Sebastian Junger, that's right. That's it.
Yeah. Linda Greenlaw also wrote about it in her own boat. She was in the sister to the Perfect Storm book.
That's
vessel.
correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and also, you don't have a lot of time. I can tell you right now, when I saw that wave approach us, and I figured out what exactly was happening, there was really not much time to give any helm commands or anything like that. We were pretty much going to be taking it or not. So these situations can develop very quickly, and you may not be able to respond at all to the conditions.
Other
Do
questions?
we have any other questions?
Someone asked if I can go back to the first slide. I'm working on that. Bear with me.
Okay.
There was also a question from Miles. When you showed the map, it looked like there was an incident of a rogue wave in the middle of the Caspian Sea. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I will say there was a rogue wave reported in the middle of the Caspian Sea.
That is crazy.
I can only tell you that what has been reported. And as I mentioned, just because it was reported doesn't make it the best evidence, because there are people who have died who can't make a report.
It looked like a lake for a second. I thought it was it. Is that what that was? No, I think that was when I looked back at it.
I think that's the Black Sea.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I
they
think
both
that's the
look like
Black Sea.
lakes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the best map. I agree.
It appears that the waves are relative to the size of the boat, because they can be dangerous waves and a lot less higher than the rogue waves that you demonstrated. But there's still waves that can cause you problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why a rogue wave is only twice wave height, and a 9-foot wave, mean wave height is nothing unusual on the ocean. So an 18-foot wave, that's not, I mean, that'll cause problems for a boat, but that's not certainly, you know, it's not the end of the world. One time, I was on an OSV in the Gulf of Mexico, and we were getting steady 25-foot waves, and it actually knocked us into this oil platform. I mean, 25-foot waves, that's nothing to sneeze at, but it was really steady. I was surprised. And so if you were to double that, that could crush boats.
Or on the Chesapeake, if you're normally in 2-foot waves, I mean, it's not unusual for a 4 or 5 foot wave to come out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be that 1 in 10,000 event. And the thing about about this 1 in 10,000, it doesn't mean it happens regularly. You're like, oh, here's number 10,000. We can start over. It's it's Monte Carlo method of statistics. So it can start over. The CAP can start over with a new voyage. It's not like you're bound to hit something. It's like basically it's like lightning. Just because you've been struck by lightning once doesn't mean that you're not going to be struck again, because the chances are so rare. Every time you go outside in an electrical storm, you're resetting to 0.
Yeah.
Michelle had a question, and I think we got the time. Michelle, would you like to just ask it? You had a couple of things up on the chat.
Hi everybody. No, I think I just missed a little bit about the conversation on the newer research to suggest how you can kind of predict this, even though it's like lightning, like you're saying, Lou. So I was just curious. I mean, given that it's so rare, I wonder to what extent you prepare and try to kind of circumvent being in areas that have this kind of
It's funny. There are some methods of predicting, and oddly enough, it's not so much the shipping companies that have shown an interest in this, but the surfers that want to claim that they have surfed the highest wave in the world. And in fact, there is I hate to call it an app, but there is an app that coordinates different components contributing to rogue waves, and then tells the surfer where to go in order to find the waves and at what time. And so I have learned about this, and it takes some investment to participate in that, but you'd think that shipping companies would be interested in that. I would say in general, avoiding areas that have the type of bottom morphology that lend itself to it, and just staying away from the type of weather that causes a bad wave climate, that's pretty much going to keep you out of trouble. So, but that's, that is my opinion, and certainly I'm not recommending that you don't use every method available to you to find out where the rogue waves are. It's just, I think there are certain things, I mean, most people have not experienced a rogue wave, and because they are unusual events.
Huh. Yeah, I wonder, like, if in tandem with this new research and like current patterns, if they've discovered more of these so-called lost ships since any researchers interested, as you say, Lou, who knows?
Well, actually, there is discovering of ships, of shipwrecks on the bottom. That's happening. And, you know, it's probably too early to tell by what method they ended up on the bottom. There's always insurance fraud, sad to say. But I can tell you in the case of the München, that they found the one end of the lifeboat. If we are able to go to the first or to the second slide, and you can look if you look at the bridge wing, and you see the davits that would hold up the lifeboat. It turns out, yeah, that's correct. That we knew that was about that was over 70 feet above the water, those davits, and we found the end of a lifeboat that had been torn from the hooks, and with a little bit of flotation. And so we knew for that lifeboat to have been pulled off of the hook, it would need, you know, something like 80 tons of water hitting it to pull it off at that height. So there is some confidence that the München had been hit by a rogue wave, or probably a freak wave, in order to make that sort of damage happen to a lifeboat. But we found, you know, a fragment of a lifeboat, so that led us to that conclusion.
There was a question about what if you're sailing and have minimal power? You run into whether a rogue wave, a freak wave, or just large waves. Any ideas about that?
Yeah, put on your PFD or your Gumby suit. If you don't have a lot of discretionary horsepower, and you're on a small boat that, you know, a small sailboat where the wave face is exceeding your length, there's just you just don't have a lot at your disposal. You just have to hunker down.
Another question: how long would it take for a rogue wave to drop down to a normal height? And I asked that same question. I'll elaborate a little bit on Bob's question, but you don't hear about these striking shore. The first picture you had was actually a regular series of waves that come into that point that's famous for this by the surfers.
Right. Well, I will say, if you recall, where the reinforcement took place is where it peaks, and when those waves move further apart from each other, then it diminishes. So the rogue wave could only occur for under 1 nautical mile, and then it starts dissipating. It could happen that way, or if it travels along a submarine volcano or submarine valley, canyon, and the walls are converging and it gets shallower, it can go for 30 miles, that rogue wave. So I don't have it diminishes when the conditions that made it dissipate. It can last as long as that, which is not a very precise answer.
Yeah. Lou, can I come back to the previous question? What do you do if you're on a small sailboat and don't have much power? The offshore sail training and storm preparation includes, and there are webinars and books on that, includes deploying a sea anchor. A sea anchor is deployed in anticipation of heavy weather and steep seas, where you deploy the anchor at a 45-degree angle to the bow, and you take down all your canvas, so that if a wave hits, you're presenting the strongest part of the vessel to the wave, and damage is reduced having taken down all the canvas ahead of time.
Well, I can see the wisdom in taking down the canvas, but I think it sure sounds difficult if you're going to deploy an anchor 45 degrees off the bow. I mean, in time, you're going to be 100, it's going to be, straight off of the bow. I mean, how do you accomplish that?
No, you have, I've done it, and you have guys, and you have a winch, and you have ways to keep the sea anchor rode at a 45-degree angle. So it's, yeah, that's possible.
You use additional lines to keep it?
Correct.
Use additional lines for that? Okay.
Yeah.
There's one more question. Is it true that ships are lost at sea at least once a month?
I have heard at least once a month. Yes, sometimes 3 times a month.
Oh. Oh.
Any other questions? Last call.
I'll just say, these lost ships, they're not all rogue waves. Sometimes we have insurance fraud. So.
Operator error.
Well, there's operator error too.
So in the insurance fraud situation, do they just, with most rogue waves, the crew disappears? What do they do with that?
I can't speak with any sort of authority about what happens to the crew in insurance fraud, but I would bet there's enough payoff for them to disappear for a while.
Whoa.
I'm not saying they're put to death. I'm just saying, they're saying, listen, you just disappear and make it look like the ship was lost, and you just have to disappear for a few months, and here's some money. Make that happen.
So they can just disappear for a few months and the investigation is over and then they come back.
Yeah. But as I said, I don't speak with any kind of authority about what happens with this. I have not been involved in any way with that sort of activity.
Maybe that's the topic of another conversation. Well, Vicki, I think that's all of the questions. Let me hand it back to you. Thank you very much, Lou. Very interesting. And I wish you had pictures or a video of it crashing over your boat, but as you said, you don't really have time to go grab your camera.
No. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Lou, thank you so very much for sharing your experience with us yet again as one of our featured speakers. Davis, thanks to you for your excellent moderating skills. We appreciate it very much.
Yes.
And
Thank you,
all of
Davis.
who joined us today, and hopefully we'll see you next month on the 4th Monday of the month, and we'll be sending out information about next month's speaker and the time and all of that. So everyone enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you next month.